Today, I am going to summarize an American psychological thriller film called Gone Girl. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. Nick Dunne is an easygoing man in his 30s who has been married to his stunning wife Amy for several years. Today marks their wedding anniversary. But unlike most husbands, Nick does not seem particularly excited about it. His demeanor is distant, suggesting that he has lost interest in his marriage. Instead of making plans or buying a gift for Amy, he heads to a bar to have a few drinks. The bartender is none other than his twin sister Margot. She quickly picks up on his troubled expression and asks what is wrong. Nick simply responds with, "Amy," and the film takes us into a flashback of the night they first met. Amy, a well-known children's book author, was hosting a book launch event that Nick happened to attend. Their meeting was purely coincidental, but their conversation flowed easily, revolving around their mutual love for literature. Nick, though a writer himself, worked for a small men's magazine, whereas Amy was adored by millions. The two hit it off immediately and decided to take a walk through the streets of New York City. Nick charmed Amy with his wit and good looks, seizing the perfect moment to kiss her. Their night ended in passionate lovemaking. Returning to the present, Nick is still at the bar, narrating his story when he suddenly receives a call from a neighbor, who informs him that his cat is outside. Concerned, Nick rushes home to bring the cat inside, but is taken aback to find the front door open. Calling out for Amy yields no response. As he searches the house, he stumbles upon a shattered glass table, which immediately raises his suspicions. Without wasting any time, he calls the police. Shortly afterward, Detective Rhonda Boney arrives at the scene with her assistant to begin the investigation. She carefully examines the house, noting a few droplets of blood in unusual spots. Upon discovering Amy's books and realizing she is a well-known author, Detective Rhonda starts treating the case as a high-profile disappearance. Nick is soon taken to the police station, where he undergoes several tests. Once these are completed, Detective Rhonda assures him that they will do everything possible to find Amy. They have already begun tracking her credit cards, deployed forensic experts to the crime scene, and scheduled a press conference to appeal for public assistance. Strangely, instead of appearing concerned, Nick finds all of this amusing and even makes a comparison to the television show Law and Order. This nonchalant attitude raises the first red flag for Detective Rhonda, prompting her to question him further. However, Nick struggles to answer even the simplest inquiries, such as Amy's blood type, her favorite food, or even her nickname. The only thing he confidently states is that Amy did not have any friends and preferred to spend most of her time reading. The film then transitions into another flashback, revealing that during their first year of marriage, Nick and Amy were extremely happy. They frequently engaged in public displays of affection and exchanged expensive gifts. However, neither of them anticipated that their relationship would soon take a turn for the worse. Back in the present, Detective Rhonda is combing through the crime scene when a pregnant woman named Noelle unexpectedly arrives, claiming to be Amy's best friend. She asserts that she has lived just a few blocks away for over a year and has been in close contact with Amy. This revelation contradicts Nick's earlier statement that Amy had no friends, making Detective Rhonda even more suspicious. She decides to interrogate Noelle later and asks her to leave for now. As the investigation continues, forensic experts make a shocking discovery. There was a large amount of blood on the kitchen floor, which had been wiped clean. Additionally, the house is registered entirely in Amy's name, further complicating the situation. The next day, the scheduled press conference takes place. Given Amy's popularity, the event is swarmed with reporters, and the entire country is watching the broadcast live. Nick, along with Amy's parents, takes the stage. However, when it is his turn to speak, he appears reluctant and awkward, struggling to form meaningful sentences. To make matters worse, he smiles for a photograph at an inappropriate moment, fueling public suspicion. That night, Nick visits his father's abandoned house to escape the overwhelming media attention. However, Detective Rhonda unexpectedly follows him, which enrages Nick. He quickly orders her to leave before departing in his car, Meanwhile, another flashback shows that the couple's relationship had begun deteriorating. Amy, feeling increasingly neglected, started recording her thoughts in a diary. The couple had moved to Nick's hometown in Missouri to care for his ailing mother, but after months of struggling, Nick was still unemployed. This forced Amy to borrow money from her wealthy parents to support their lifestyle. Despite their financial struggles, Nick irresponsibly spent money on video games. Whenever Amy tried to encourage him or initiate a serious discussion, their conversations ended in arguments. In the present, days have passed since Amy's disappearance. Her parents have organized a large event to attract volunteers for the search. Meanwhile, Nick's careless behavior continues to raise eyebrows. Instead of appearing distressed, he casually takes selfies with attendees, further damaging his public image. That night, in an attempt to escape the media frenzy, Nick decides to stay at Margot's house. Unfortunately, even there, he finds no peace. News channels are heavily scrutinizing his seemingly indifferent attitude, questioning whether he is even sad about his wife's disappearance. Margot, unable to ignore the accusations, confronts her brother. Nick, frustrated by the relentless judgment, snaps at her, insisting that the past few days have been nothing short of a nightmare for him. He just wants one night of rest without being scrutinized. Margot, realizing her brother's distress, apologizes and goes to sleep. Later that night, an unexpected visitor sneaks into the house. A young woman suddenly jumps into Nick's arms as it is revealed that she is his secret girlfriend, Andy. This revelation explains a lot. Nick's lack of concern for Amy's disappearance is because he has been involved with someone else. However, this also raises a crucial question: did he have something to do with Amy's disappearance? As the night unfolds, Nick and Andy get intimate. The next morning, Margot catches them in the act. She is furious and berates her brother for keeping such a significant secret from her. Nick, however, defends himself, explaining how Amy made his life miserable. Over time, she stopped caring for him, and their marriage became unbearable. Feeling trapped, he sought comfort elsewhere and found solace in one of his students, Andy. Margot is shocked by this confession and warns Nick that if the authorities uncover his affair, he will be in deep trouble. To make matters worse, Nick is already the main suspect in Amy's disappearance, and the media is scrutinizing his every move. Then, she turns on the television and shows Nick that he is dominating the news, but for all the wrong reasons. In another flashback, Amy's diary reveals that she once wanted to have a child with Nick, believing it could mend their failing relationship. However, Nick was adamantly against the idea. During a heated argument over the issue, he lost his temper and pushed Amy to the floor, unintentionally hurting her. Though he apologized repeatedly, it was at that moment that Amy reached her breaking point. She started to fear for her safety and began considering divorce. However, she believed that Nick would never willingly leave her because he was reliant on her parents' money. Back in the present, Detective Rhonda receives the forensic report of the blood samples found in the house. The results confirm that the blood belongs to Amy. That night, Nick is scheduled to address a large crowd. Just as he prepares to speak, Noelle, the woman who claimed to be Amy's best friend, interrupts and publicly accuses him of hiding the truth. She dramatically reveals that Amy was actually several weeks pregnant at the time of her disappearance. This revelation stuns everyone, including Margot, Andy, and Amy's parents. The crowd turns hostile toward Nick, but before things escalate further, the police escort him away from the scene. That night, as Nick is drinking at home, Detective Rhonda confronts him with a set of photographs, which show that Amy and Noelle were indeed good friends. She also tells him that the blood inside the kitchen belongs to his wife. Finally, Detective Rhonda comes to the conclusion that Amy was murdered. She only needs the dead body to confirm her theory and put Nick behind bars. After she is gone, Margot approaches her distressed brother and asks him about Amy's pregnancy. Surprisingly, Nick reveals that he never knew about it. In fact, Amy never wanted to have a baby. At the same time, Detective Rhonda reaches Nick's father's house to look for clues. She does not find a body, but she finds Amy's half-burnt diary in the furnace. Following this, we are taken to the day of the disappearance. In a shocking turn of events, it is revealed that Amy herself is the perpetrator of the whole incident. Everything that is pointing toward her husband's arrest was meticulously planned by her. In Amy's eyes, Nick took her soul by lying to her, cheating on her, and taking away her pride and money. We are then shown how she staged the whole thing. At first, she secretly befriended the dumbest neighbor in the area and invited her home. Knowing that Noelle was pregnant, Amy cunningly stole her urine sample and took it to a local hospital to create fake medical records. She also filled Noelle's mind with lies about how Nick beats her up every night. As for the crime scene, Amy drew 2 bags of blood from her hand and splattered it across the kitchen floor. She then swept it carelessly so that the police could find traces of it. Finally, Amy wrote fake stories in her diary and left it for the cops. This means that Nick never assaulted her. In fact, she was the aggressive one. As Amy drives away in her car, she reveals that she started planning the night she saw Nick cheating on her. Elsewhere, Nick has also become sure that his wife is trying to frame him. But since he has no proof, he decides to visit Tanner, the smartest lawyer in the country. Tanner immediately showcases his quick thinking skills by advising Nick on a few things. If he wants to win the case, firstly, he has to make sure the country is on his side. For that, he has to defame Amy. Tanner says that the first step would be to find someone she screwed over in the past and get a testimony from them. Nick knows just the perfect guy. Before him, Amy was in a relationship with Desi Collins, a rich guy from New York. The two were a perfect match because of their high standards, but soon, Desi became possessive. This resulted in their breakup, and when Desi still didn't stop pursuing Amy, she had to file a restraining order against him. But to this day, he still writes letters to her. Nick uses the address from one of these letters and visits his mansion. But unfortunately, Desi doesn't want to speak badly about the love of his life. Despite everything that Amy has done to him, he still wants to defend her. On the other hand, Amy has completely changed her identity and is now living in a small neighborhood. She mostly minds her own business and tries to stay away from everyone around. However, one day, she accidentally drops her thick wad of money, which a few of her neighbors notice. That night, she is attacked by the same people, who beat her up and take the money away. The only good thing is that they didn't realize she is the Gone Girl from the news. But Amy doesn't want to take the chance, so she packs her belongings and leaves the place. She doesn't have a place to stay, so she calls the only person who loves her unconditionally, Desi Collins. In the next scene, the two meet in a casino, and Amy quickly starts manipulating him. She lies that she was forced to run away from her home as Nick was about to kill her. Now, she cannot return back, as the entire nation will perceive her as a coward. Desi immediately buys her story and takes this as the perfect opportunity to reconcile with her. Hence, he escorts Amy to his private villa, which lies in the middle of nowhere. There are cameras around the entire place, so Amy won't have to worry about being discovered. Elsewhere, after the first plan fails, Tanner tells Nick to go live on television and confess about his illicit affair. This will gain him a lot of sympathy, as everyone likes an honest man. Unfortunately, on the interview day, they get a major shock. Nick's girlfriend Andy breaks the news herself. This leaves Nick in a perilous position. Tanner explains that now they are on the back foot, so going live on television would be a death wish. However, Nick reassures him that he can handle it. Then, he goes on the interview set, puts on a serious face, and delivers an emotional confession. Although many believe that he is faking it, Amy, who is watching from the villa, is impressed. She is especially touched when Nick mentions, "I will love my wife forever." Now, days after her disappearance, which has caused a nationwide uproar, Amy is thinking of returning back to her husband. However, there is one problem. Desi is really expecting her to be his wife. He has even left his personal life and isolated himself in the villa with her. Amy knows that if she tries to leave, he will become violent and do something drastic. Hence, she decides to kill two birds with one stone. At first, she goes inside the bathroom, the only place there are no cameras. Then, she leaves rope marks on her wrists to make it look like she had been tied up. For the second step, she scars her private organs and goes near one of the cameras to record herself screaming. Later, when Desi arrives home, she seduces him to make out with her. As he is distracted, Amy finishes him off brutally. Elsewhere, things are looking grim for Nick, as Detective Rhonda has gone through the entire diary and is on the verge of arresting him. But one morning, everything changes. Amy arrives outside the house, still covered in Desi's blood. This changes the whole complexion of the case. Nick, who was America's most hated man a while ago, is now innocent. In the evening, the doctors examine Amy and conclude that she was mistreated. Nick knows that she is once again deceiving everyone, but he has no evidence to prove it. Later, in front of a number of officials, Amy tells her BS story. She explains how her overpossessive boyfriend, Desi, kidnapped her and held her hostage for several weeks. The news goes viral, and once again, Amy becomes the sweetheart of America. Except for Nick and his sister Margot, everyone believes her sob story. In the final scene, the couple returns back to their home, and the drama is over. In Nick's eyes, Amy is a murderer, but the latter explains that she did everything to get back to him. However, with everything that has happened, Nick is afraid to live with her. He tells her that he's leaving, but Amy threatens to ruin his life if he even considers doing so. Hearing this, Nick realizes that he is trapped with this lunatic forever. The movie ends as he puts Amy to sleep and locks the door from outside, indicating that he doesn't feel safe in his house anymore.